Welcome to the Story Geeks Show, part of the Orange Grove 55 network. Today, we are talking about Ahsoka. We've got a great crew to talk about this show, and we're talking about all three episodes, the first three episodes, episodes 1 through 3 on the show today. It's good to be back. We've been on hiatus for a little while, and one of the reasons that we've been on hiatus is because, first of all, the OG 55 crew was super busy gallivanting across the United States, going to Disney and Universal parks. But on top of that, we have some writers and actor strikes going on right now, and we wanted to be respectful to those two groups. I will say right now that I am personally on the side of both the writers and the actors, and so we want to get this strike over with. Please, studios, get back to the table and pay these folks. They deserve all that they're asking for. And so I hope you guys can all come to a conclusion on that. But this show is not about the strikes. I just want to make sure that we put our support out there for those of you who are in the writing or acting world. I have a bunch of friends. As an independent producer, I have a bunch of friends who fit into these groups, and some of them are really starting to feel the pain of the strikes going on for so long. So want to give that disclaimer before we jump into it. But today is all about Ahsoka, and we have a fantastic crew to talk about Ahsoka. Joining us is Retro Nerd Girl. We've been trying to get her on the show for a really long time. Retro, can you tell the folks about what you're up to on your channels and your socials and where people can find you?
Oh, sure. The main place that you can find me is definitely on YouTube under Retro Nerd Girl. And what I typically do in my on my channel is that I review and look at a lot of retro movies, a lot of ones that we all know of, and some obscure ones too. I just reviewed a movie called Bye from 1964, and it was done in Russia. So it's really an interesting movie that is so wild and crazy, but I love uncovering things like that. I also do live streams as well. I do a Wednesday morning show. And I do retro discussions on Fridays, and on Saturdays I do watch parties. Like today, we watched Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Nice. Nice.
Cool. Very
That's
cool.
a classic. I love that movie. I love that movie.
Oh yeah, it brought me to tears. I was crying through the whole thing because it's so touching as well.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
If you were gonna give people a retro movie that most people have not seen, what would be your go-to retro movie? You say, go check this out if you guys are fans of retro stuff, or if you haven't seen it, they have to see it.
Oh wow!
I'm asking for myself.
Ooh, okay. It depends on your taste. Why don't we do The Keep? It's a really weird it's more sci-fi, but also take place in World War II, and it's very eclectic. So that's a rare one that not too many people know about.
Yeah, I've never heard of it, so I'm in. That sounds awesome.
Okay.
I always love listening to Quentin Tarantino talk about movies because he's seen so many films, and a lot of them fit into that retro category of they were made in the 60s or 70s, and I'm like, I've never heard of these films, so I love the recommendation. Go check out The Keep. We also have with us Citrus George. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Glad to be back on Story Geeks with Jay. Thank you, Jay, very much for having me. And ready to talk some Star Wars.
Yeah, ready to talk some Star Wars. George is the host of Citrus Corner, where you can. Why don't you give the plug? Because I would say it, but I don't even know the
of course. So you could find me on Twitter or X or whatever they call it nowadays at Disney George. You could find me on the podcast called A Walk with Walt, where we dive in to a lot of the rich nostalgia and history of the man, the legend, the myth, Mr. Walt Disney himself. And of course, you'll find me here on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner, with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
There it is.
There it is. There it is.
I love it. I was just on a show with shout out to Michael Young and That Nerd Soul, and I was talking with Michael Young and Solar Gray. and they both had the coolest intros. They're very like, you know, like you got your little catchphrases and stuff. These guys brought the intros. I'm sitting there, yeah, I'm Jay. I do some things. Like, I don't know, man. I need a new intro. OG, what about you? Well, you are the godfather, the Don of the channel, if you will. Like, tell us about what we got going on the Orange Grove 55 network.
There we go. Yeah, no, you're doing all kinds of stuff as usual, talking all kinds of park stuff. We dive deep dive into the parks, anything new going on with that. We also get into the corporate world, you know, whether when Chapek was in there, we were talking all about Chapes. Now it's all about Bob Iger again. This is crazy. We're into that. We also do the movies and studio stuff like we are today. So we do an eclectic mix. We even dove into some K-pop, you know, so we're doing all kinds of stuff over here at OT55. And you can find me here on YouTube. You can also find me on X at Orange Grove 55. And you can even find me on Instagram now. I know I'm a late bloomer. I'm finally on Instagram. Same thing, Orange Grove 55. And since we have Retro Nerd Girl on, one of my favorite retro Saturday morning cartoons, Transformers.
It's been living with you all.
There we go.
I love it. Well, my name is Jay Sherer, and you can find me on X as well. You can see it right down here, and you can follow me over there. Usually talking with these guys about crazy stuff related to Disney or whatever is going on in the world. You can also find me on How Stories Work with Jay Sherer. That is our main channel where we are also producing original content, original stories over there. We're working on a short film right now. And huge thank you to SAG, because SAG has basically said we're still supporting independent filmmaking, and so we still get to make our film and have it abide by all of the SAG regulations, and we're going to be doing that in a couple months. So if you want to see that film and check out what we got going along the way, head over to How Stories Work with Jay Sherer, and we'll have stuff over there for you to check out. In the meantime, we're going to react to Ahsoka and talk about a lot of the things that have been brought up by a lot of people. We're going to get into it. So my first question for you guys, first topic of discussion, and I'll start with you, Retro. I want to know kind of like what your feelings are about episodes 1 through 3. Do you like them? Do you not like them? And if you can, give me a scale of 1 to 10 ranking for each one of the episodes. Episode 1, episode 2, and episode 3. What do you think?
Okay, I hope I don't get into trouble. But I think they're progressively getting better, in my opinion. But I'm still desiring more, I could say, storytelling, or more of a descriptive kind of narrative for the characters. I understand that there's a lot of backlog of detail about the characters that already have lore. However, right now, if you were just walking into the room, or you're just clueless, you wouldn't have an idea of who these people are in relation to each other. But taking that out of consideration, just so far, I'm feeling like this could go somewhere interesting, and I just do hope that they continually go up the ladder to getting better. I liked the episode 1 the least. I wanted to give it a 5. I was like, not really happy with it, but I said, you know what, there is something here. So I gave it a 6.5. The second one I gave a 7.5, and this one, episode 3, I gave it an 8.5.
Oh, nice.
So it's growing, it's getting there for me, and I hope we get to the higher numbers with this.
Oh, I love that. Because we're going to get into some more details about like some of your thoughts around that. And I would probably say that I'm the exact opposite, which I'll talk about in a minute.
Wow.
But it's interesting because our problem is the same. Because our problem is the storytelling isn't quite there yet, and so we're kind of going like, wait, how come? So I love that. We're gonna get into that in more depth. So that's perfect. George, what do you got for these 3 episodes? What do you think?
I actually, everything that you just said is exactly what my answer is. my issue is, and yes, I agree with you, Jay. Mine actually moves forward. I actually like it in that order, 1, 2, 3. Because with me, and with a lot of these Star Wars series, minus Mandalorian. Mandalorian stands by itself. That thing is a kick-ass series. You can't touch it. But when it comes to like the Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi, my issue is they start out kind of strong. It captivates you to want to sit and watch more. But then as the series progresses, it starts to dip for me. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, okay, where are we going with this? And then by the time you finally get to the end, which I hope this isn't the case with Ahsoka, and it's like, okay, I'm kind of over this already. It's like, it's not going anywhere. I don't think that's going to be the case with Ahsoka because, I mean, her character arc is so strong from the animated series. I kind of hope they bring that into the live action series of Ahsoka, where it's retelling her story of how she got where she's been, where she's going, you know, sort of that kind of that kind of mentality. However, for me, this is going to sound kind of odd. I don't really have like a number stamped for the first 3 episodes, only because for me, all 3 of them kind of sit in the same bundle where it's like I don't really know fully what's going on yet. Right. So I can't really say that one is like so much more better than the other until I actually start to see the story flesh out.
Right.
Yeah, it was interesting you mentioned that too, because I'm on Nerd Souls podcast. We're talking about Ahsoka over there, and one of the things that we had talked about in our last episode was that this is an 8-episode series. And so the end of Act 1, if you divide up the really quick math on writing, by the way, your Act 1 normally would be your first 25% of your film. Your Act 2 is the next 50%, and your Act 3 is the last 25%. Right? It's kind of how it breaks down. And 2 episodes in, you would be all the way out of Act 1, and you'd be starting Act 2. And so Episode 3 would be the start of Act 2. What's weird is that it doesn't feel like we've finished Act 1 yet. In fact, we may have just gotten to Act 1 at the end of Episode 3, and you're sitting there going like, wow, that took a long time to get to the end of Act 1.
And that's the issue, like with the other series I was talking about. So by the time you actually finally get to Act 3, it's like so underwhelming because they like try to pump everything into Act 1. It starts dipping in 2, and then by Act 3, it flatlines.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm very much in the same boat as George, but OG, where are you at?
Yeah, I agree. No, I agree with George in that they feel like a bundle. I can't really rate each individual. It feels like one piece, and maybe that's because I watched all 3. I binged all 3 at once, so that might be part. And so did George, actually. So that might be why we're sort of seeing it in that way. But overall, I like the series. I don't love it, but I like it, if that makes sense. Like, I would probably give, like, so far, the first 3 episodes, probably a 7.5. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I would agree with you, Jay. I think that it is better than Kenobi. It looks a whole lot better than Kenobi. I don't know what happened with Kenobi. Kenobi is like one of their, I mean, that was a show, right? To digress this a little bit, fans were begging for that thing. And it was okay, but I feel like they really got stingy with the budget on that one. And it's like, why? Like, that's your bread and butter.
OG,
like,
I was in
and all that.
OG, I was in the room like at the D23 Expo when Hugh McGregor came on. Like, we all went nuts. You know, it was like he's coming back as Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we were expecting like steak tartare with this thing. And I'm sorry, we got poor man's chili.
Boy.
Yeah, it didn't, like, there were elements in there that were dope, you know, really, really cool. But a lot of it just fell flat. This one feels like a much more high budget production. So that's cool. Visually, it's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. Right? It's beautiful.
And I do have to just add really quick, because I was kind of hesitant on how Rosario Dawson was going to portray Ahsoka, because we're so used to Ashley doing the voice of her in the anime series. And I have to say, as a live action Ahsoka, Rosario Dawson really fits the bill, and she does the character very well.
Oh no, she crushes. I think she's fantastic in this, and we'll kind of get into it. I know one of the questions here is kind of like the comparisons between the animated and the live action and all that. But I think Rosario does a good job at sort of you're going to have some differences between these characters, between the anime and live action. You always kind of do, right? Like for me personally, I think Vader is different in the animation than he is in the live action stuff. And obviously there's time gaps there too, which makes a difference, but there's always going to be that level of like difference because it is a different audience. A lot of the animation is for younger. So I understand that, but I think Rosario does a very, very good job. I like her a lot. Let me see. Who is the young lady who plays Sabine? Natasha Bordizzo. I think she is absolutely fantastic. She's one of my favorite things about the show, to be honest with you. I think she's absolutely phenomenal. I think she does a really, really good job with Sabine. But overall, I think it's a good show. I wouldn't say it's a great show. The pacing is, I think, more in line with Andor. It's a little bit of a slow burn. It really lets you kind of marinate, which is good, Longer episodes, none of this 25-minute garbage that they always do with Star Wars. You get some decent sized episodes, 45, 50 minutes. I mean, I think it's decent. And here's the other thing too that I think a lot of people have to remember. Dave Filoni is really kind of the king when it comes to as you go on, you get more and more invested. Like I found myself with Rebels in the beginning, kind of like, I don't know about this. Ezra, all he is Galactic Aladdin. I'm whatever, right? That's all. It just whatever. And then as you went on, by the series finale, you were all in. You were crying. It was amazing. I think Filoni's really good at that. I think he knows how to build. So I think this is a very strong start for Filoni because if this is the beginning, I'm telling you, I think this show might end with a banger because he usually ends strong, in my opinion. This is my opinion.
And I think that's probably why, and nothing against the other director who directed episode 2. I actually forget his name. But I think that's probably why I like episode 1 so much is because Filoni actually directed that episode. So, I mean, you can see a lot of his handprint in the direction of that first episode.
Yeah.
I have a whole topic for us to discuss Dave Filoni Star Wars versus some of the other creators because I think that's a really interesting comparison. I do think so. From my stance, there's some things in the show that we don't have yet, and that's where I start to get worried. I do think you're right, OG. I do think that he lands the plane pretty well for the most part. The last 4 episodes of the Clone Wars is some of the best Star Wars that you can watch. I mean, the final end of Ahsoka's journey through that series is fantastic. But at the same time, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, we are already 3 episodes into an 8-episode season, and I don't know why the bad guys are doing what they're doing. Like, there's someone mentioned unlimited power. I'm like, okay, fine, but like, what else? What else are you do? Why are you doing this? Like, and also, I really care about the bad guys in this one because, first of all 3 of them are cool. Morgan is cool as a Night Sister. Balin is cool as like a Anakin replacement Vader, and then Shin is cool as kind of like his assassin kind of person. So I'm really into them, but I have no idea why they're doing what they're doing. I guess you can bring back Thrawn, but why bring back Thrawn? Why would those people want to bring back Thrawn? And on top of that, there's some of the coolest there's this idea of like gray Jedi, and there's like no such thing as gray Jedi. But we talk about when we refer to gray Jedi, we're talking about people who are not light side fully into the Jedi Order or dark side fully into the Sith Order. So you've got Ahsoka, and then you've got these 2 people who are not Sith. I mean, they're not messed up yet, right? Like they're controlling themselves to a degree. And I'm like, what are they? How did they get here? Why are they doing this? What's going on in their lives? I really would like to know, and we know nothing. So I'm nervous. I think Kenobi made me nervous because one of the things that I wanted Kenobi to do is I wanted Kenobi to prove that it deserved to be a story that we had missed out on and that we got to see. And at the end of Kenobi, I went, oh man, that was just an excuse to have an Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Like there wasn't like any compelling reason to put us through that particular arc. There were some really cool moments, but overarchingly, it was kind of like, oh, okay. It kind of fits into this global thing. So I don't know where to sit with it. I think that's why my rating has gone down. I will say episode 3 also, I did not like the action sequence in that one where Ahsoka. By the way, we should tell everybody we're gonna spoil everything. So if you haven't seen Ahsoka yet, just know. But when she goes outside, I think that kind of thing can work well in animation. But for me personally, it does not. Because then I'm sitting there thinking I'm sitting there thinking well, when does gravity kick in and when does it not kick in? Are those gravity boots and so you can walk on the thing and then all of a sudden she jumps off the thing and now she can't get back? I don't understand. Why can't she force pull it? I have so many questions about that whole
See, episode three felt rushed to me.
Yeah.
Like it felt like, and I didn't understand why, but after you had mentioned, Jay, about breaking down Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, now it kind of makes sense to me because it feels like since they weren't ending Act 1, it's okay, we got to hurry up and we got to scrunch this into an episode, but it's going to make episode 2 too long. So let's just make a short episode 3 so we can move on to Act 2. So,
and it was extremely short.
Very short. Yeah, we could have used some extra.
Yeah, I thought it would have been great for them to develop the bad guys a little bit. That would have been perfect. To just scooch that right in there.
Yeah, and they had time for it too, right? Like there were times when we were seeing kind of what they were doing. We even end on Balin, I believe. We end on him in that little I don't know, Night Sister circle or whatever he's sitting in or standing in. But yeah, George, I totally agree. I think that what the end of Act 1 for Ahsoka was Ahsoka and Sabine not being able to get the support of Hera and the rest of the New Republic. And so basically that was the end. It was we're going in a new direction here. You're not going to see from Hera as much because Ahsoka and Sabine have to do this on their own because there's no support coming from any of the new senators. They don't want to do anything. And that was the end of Act 1. It was okay, now they're on their own. But we get it kind of late and kind of disjointed, and I still have questions about how Disney edits their television series, but it was interesting to see Kathleen Kennedy at Celebration say, we were given the directive from Disney that we had to do shows for Disney Plus, and we've never done shows outside of Dave Filoni doing his animation. Because when I watch these shows, I get the feeling these are not people who really understand TV, besides Tony Gilroy and Andor. I think his team kind of got that a little bit better. But I do have confidence that this show is going to be better. So I'm not just going to sit here and complain about it. It's just that I'm in confused mode. I'm in kind of let's go. Yeah. I want to get somewhere. Yeah. So one of the things. Oh, go ahead, OG.
No, I was gonna say too. One thing that this has kind of going forward, other than Kenobi, is in Kenobi, I found myself every time the story would sort of divert to other characters, outside of Kenobi and Anakin. I was all in on the Kenobi and Anakin stuff. I was on the edge of my seat. Oh my god, this is crazy, right? Yeah. But when they went on to the Reva stuff and all that, I was kind of okay. I kind of tuned out a little bit. It was it just, I don't know. It wasn't as interesting to me. I will give this show credit, outside of Ahsoka and that team of rebels or whatever, when they go to Balin and the other, what's her name? Shin. Yes, exactly. I'm still as interested. I feel this show does a better job than Kenobi did with introducing these kind of these new characters and what have you. And I feel like I'm more invested in them than I was in the new characters for Kenobi. So I'll say that much.
Yeah. They're able for some reason. And this is one of the things I really am trying to figure out with Ahsoka. And I guess we'll get to that part soon, but it has to do with your comment about how those other characters are working in the story, and they look interesting, and I think it's time for us to know more, because I think we've just about had just all the coolness we can get out of those characters. Yeah, and Ahsoka really at this point really feels almost like a sub character, like a supporting character to me. That's how she's really coming off as. And whereas I really, I think they're trying to do something how Luke was in Return of the Jedi, was wise and had all those kinds of emotive abilities like that, but it's just not working here because we don't know what she's thinking, and we really don't know. We know that she's after Thrawn, but why? And it's just not like if he's on his way back. She just helped him in a way by. I don't know. It just seems like it's not working. This whole concept of Thrawn and her I'm not getting that part.
Yeah.
I
love what you just said about the coolness of these characters has sort of run its course, and now we need to know what's going. That's so true. You can leave somebody kind of mysterious for a period of time, and then at some point you got to be like, okay, but why are they in this series? And this is the point. We got to know why they're in this series. That's fantastic.
Yeah, because what there are right now are mystery boxes, and I mystery boxes are cool, but you need at some point you need to open up the box, or people will just disappear on you. And like, this is not really cool. We need to know some answers about these characters.
No, you're absolutely right, Retro. And Disney has a history of doing this with Star Wars. Like, they introduce these really cool characters like Phasma, or for example, right, with the sequel trilogy, and it's like fans are like, "Oh, that's a dope character. I want to learn more." They never give you more. It's this very superficial, like, "Oh, look at the cool armor." It's like, yeah, that was cool, but we need to know more. We want to really dive into this a little bit more, and I feel like Disney doesn't do that very well sometimes. Go ahead.
We want to know who's under the armor. Like who is like the character behind the suit, and I was waiting for that build up anticipation with Captain Phasma. I know we're kind of going off the grid here, but it was like then the way that they killed her off in The Last Jedi, and it was like, oh man, they just like totally obliterated like a good character of not even knowing anything about her. And then Snoke, it was like, oh god, it was like they had so much potential there, and it was like, oh man.
Yeah.
You guys are giving me the perfect segue, the most perfect segue of all time. You said who's under the armor, and you brought up Snoke and theories, and now we have to transition because I guess his name is Morik.
Yeah.
Morik is Balin's other sidekick. So he's not doing the rule of two unless Morik isn't really a Force user, because he's got Shin and Morik underneath him, apparently. And all of there's I don't know why the fandom does this, and we love to do this as a fandom. We love to do this. We love to go, what is, like, so to your point, Retro, about mystery boxes, who is this mystery box? They must be someone that we've seen before. They must be something that's so powerful. But so there's all these ideas of who Morik really is. People are saying maybe he's this, maybe he's that, maybe he's Starkiller, maybe he's what. What do you think, George? Is Morik anybody, or is Morik just another goon that that Balin has at his disposal? What's going on here?
Okay, so I was going to save this for like another question. I think that's part of the list, but I guess I could still transition into it even afterwards. My issue is with a lot of these characters, primarily the villains, and I touched upon this before the recording. Especially in Star Wars, moving forward with all these series and what have you, I have trouble with the villains' character arc. And because of the uncertainty of what they're all about. And with that uncertainty comes, they don't seem like a big enough threat. They just seem like they're there, kind of like as if you were to see like a motorcycle gang. It's like they're up to no good, but it's like they're not going to be to the destruction of planet Earth. So it's like, so are they really a big enough threat to the Star Wars universe? And it's like when I look at these characters, it's like I want more. I want to see the villains pose a bigger threat. So as of right now, and this is just me, it just seems like it's just another character. I could be wrong, but until I start to see the story flesh out more with all these characters, and I really even hate to say this, I even see this with the heroes in this series. They all seem like they're on this same base level where it's like you don't know really what the hell is going on. It's like, because there should be ups and downs to every character, their weaknesses, their highs, their emotion into their characteristics. Right now, it just seems like everyone is just on a complete same level page. And it's like, I want to see more. So as of right now, it just seems like he's just another quote unquote goon. until I start to see more, and hopefully we get more. If that's how he ends up becoming, then that's his character. But it's like it's the unknowing of not seeing character development, and that's what drives me nuts with these Star Wars series.
So George is on the nothing special about this guy kind of take. I kind of share that take, by the way. What do you think, OG? Is Morik something special? I mean, our buddy Josh from Den of Nerds is over there going through every conspiracy theory imaginable about what it could be.
Oh yeah, actually, I was going to bring up Josh from Den of Nerds because Josh is saying it's Star Killer. Like
a lot of people are saying that,
right? Yeah, like the canon version of Star Killer, which, could be a different version other than the video game. Like the video game version, he's like all powerful, crazy, right? So the canon version might be a little bit more subdued, so to speak. But that's a theory that's out there. Like you said, Retro Girl, like that's something that's out there for sure. We've kind of gone down this road, not just with Star Wars, but we've also gone down this road with Marvel. I remember being so addicted to WandaVision. I love that show.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And everyone's wondering with that whole thing at the end, like the Quicksilver, the multiverse Quicksilver kid from the X-Men, from the Fox universe or whatever. Oh, man, this is going to be crazy, yada, yada, yada. And it just ended with a boner joke, right? And it's like, it's like, how many times? And there were so many theories about Mephisto and all this stuff with that show, and none of it ever panned out, right? None of it ever panned out. I kind of feel, George, like I kind of agree with you. Like, I think there's all these fan theories out there. It's like the Snoke theories and all this other stuff. And then it'll be just some rando that they introduce, some new rando, Yeah. More than likely, that's what's going to happen. Hey, maybe they'll surprise us. Filoni, there is one thing about Filoni. He does kind of understand the audience a lot better, like fans and stuff. I think he might give the fans a little red meat and give them something like, to get really excited about. Maybe it will be someone really cool. I don't know though, considering the history both with Lucasfilm and Marvel, it's probably a nobody.
Yeah, it might be.
Yeah, Retro, you have the final say on this. Do you think it's somebody? Do you think it's nobody? What do you think?
I think it isn't it may not be anyone we know. And I actually hope that it's a new character. Like it's like truly a new character. What's very interesting is that there is supposed to the way I guess the last episode ends, it looks like he might get into a squibble squabble with Ahsoka. So
I like that. Squibble squabble. That's good.
That's the best way. So I don't know if he's going to even make it. So that's kind of exciting, like to not know. And I think I'm cool at that place. Like he's cool. I mean, there was never anything to guide me into the direction that he should be somebody special. Right. But it is curious why is he taking orders from a Padawan, and he seems to be a fully developed Force user. So I'm like, maybe he's just doing mercenary work. He's a lone ranger, kind of doing his own thing, but taking gigs here and there. So these are just kind of little story details that they could have put in that episode, so that way we could be like, okay, we know who that guy is. It's cool, moving forward with that character. But I think also they're wanting this kind of conversation to continue. Yes. Like if we leave the mystery about who it is, people will speculate who it is. But I'm not sure if it works. I mean, all the time, because we should be speculating on something I believe more important. Like what is going to happen about things like Thrawn possibly coming back to the galaxy, or what will happen when they go to that other galaxy if they do go. What are they going to find? Is Thrawn in a supreme power there, or there's so many options there that I think maybe would be a better thing to think about than Merrick. But that is the hot topic right now.
Well, and Retro Nurgle, you're absolutely correct, and I think you're right. I think Lucasfilm and Disney, I think they want to have. I think they want fans to have that conversation, that theory, that fan speculation. The risky part about that, though, is that you build up this like fervor of like, who is it? And it gets like, we're talking about Den of Nerves. It's Star Killer, yada, yada, yada. Like now, if it comes out that it's nobody, what's going to happen? Because now all these fans, there's a segment of the fandom that's going to be like, oh my God, it was supposed to be Star Killer, supposed to be this person and that person, and now it's just a nobody. It's going to be the boner thing all over again.
Yeah.
That's why that's why I stopped after The Last Jedi. Like I had so many theories going into that movie. It was like, oh yeah, like Snoke is this mysterious thing. Like I want to know more about Snoke and Phasma. It's like, okay, we're going to get more answers. They kind of left us at a cliffhanger with The Force Awakens, so we're going to kind of get more answers. And then at the end of that movie, I was like, oh man, that really sucked. Like it was like,
Oh yeah.
and it's like, and after that point, I was done. I was done with my fan theory, like within the lore of Star Wars. It's like, I'm just going to take it as it comes because I'm not getting myself all excited. And then all of a sudden, and what OG said, I could actually repeat it, but I think, but yeah, so after The Last Jedi, it became very disappointing.
Yeah, for me, that was after WandaVision for the same reasons that you were talking about, OG, because it was like that you kept thinking that somebody was behind all this, and it was just then it just ended up being Agatha, and it was like, okay, no, it's not that big a deal. And anyway, I will say you can go find all of this on past shows that we've done, probably on either OG55 or on How Stories Work with Jay Sherer. But I will tell you now that killing Snoke in the middle of Act 2 is what ruins the sequel trilogy in terms of a storyline and a story plot, because there was the two directors were not on the same page with what was going to happen, and that that forced them to do a lot of things that I don't think that they were planning to do at all, and got them in serious trouble. So I hope that this doesn't happen with this show, where we have something happen where either it's so that's why I'm like George. I'm not trying to guess at what's going on, because I'm like, you know what? If you can only hype yourself up so many times, your mind can do more than the storytellers are even capable of, and that's part of the problem.
True. True.
And so you sometimes need to be like, I'm just going to let the story come at me the way the story's going to come at me. I'm not going to go in there and try to become one of the writers of the show.
Well, and you're right. And your mind, people like your mind, like I think our minds are very powerful things, you know, and this is going to sound super cheesy, but it's true. Our minds are very powerful things, and people with like anxiety or like paranoia or whatever, you connect dots that maybe aren't there, you know, and this other kind of stuff. Right. And so you take that into a fandom, and I'm not saying fandom is paranoid or nothing like that. I'm just saying, like, as an example, that like, you know, how your brain can kind of go places that necessarily aren't like reality necessarily. And so I think with this speculation, I think it's kind of like people start, okay, it's Star Killer, and then you start to like, your brain starts to connect these dots that right, and it kind of goes there, and it's like, no, like if you were to have this mindset of like, if you were to wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm being followed by the feds, and you had this mindset all day long, you could notice things in the oh man, look at that guy in the glasses over there in the supermarket. Oh man, maybe that's one of them, right? And you can start connect dots that aren't necessarily there. And I think fandom kind of does this in a way. So it's like, oh, it's Star Killers, and now they're connecting dots, and it's not necessarily, you know, reality. And then before you know it, it's a big boner joke, and it just leads to a problem every single time. This whole thing with Merrick, I'm very, very certain it'll probably be nobody. And then you're gonna have people like Josh, Den of Nerds, who I'm a fan of. I watch his show.
Me too.
He's cool. He's really funny. He's really funny. He's awesome, you know, but he will get on there and be like, oh God, look at it. It was just this guy. It was nobody.
Well, it helps him create a lot of content. I mean, he's done like 4 videos. I'm like, why it could be somebody else? I'm like, all right, I don't know. George and I are over here on the sidelines just eating popcorn.
Well, you know what? It is a lot of fun to speculate. And
it is.
You can have like great conversations about that. But if it gets to be too, you know, crazy, I mean, we can let it go. But I think when it comes to Disney, Star Wars, I think we all have our experiences with really putting a lot of hope and energy into something, and then when you go see the product, it's like,
Exactly.
it's like you're like, what happened?
Well, and it's like with the sequel trilogy, right? Like Force Awakens, right? And I don't mean to bag on the sequel trilogy, but there's so many examples.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like they hire I think they're from Thailand, if I'm not mistaken, these martial artists from Thailand from that movie The Raid, right?
Yeah.
And there was a whole big spread on it. I remember leading up to The Force Awakens that they hired these guys to be in The Force Awakens from The Raid. And they're from Thailand, they're dope as hell. It's awesome. Oh man, and there's all the speculation, like who are these guys gonna be? I mean, they wouldn't have these guys who know all these crazy moves for nothing. And it turns out that these guys stand in a hallway and yell at Han Solo. There was nothing. There was nothing.
That's funny.
That's funny.
Like, come on, it's like, oh, yeah.
Well,
it
there
happens
was with it. I mean, you can go back even to even when you had the Knights of Ren, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think what here's the problem. George Lucas imagined this insanely complex world, and in this insanely complex world, it was so realistic that he had bounty hunters, and he had Force users, and he had Sith, and he had Jedi, and he had all the corners of the galaxy were in George's imagination. And I think that what happens is that the minute you introduce, and by the way, there's a money making idea here too, because if I tell you Kylo Ren has the Knights of Ren, now I can sell you a lot of merch about the Knights of Ren where you can own toys. And so there's this element there that I think because of George's imagination, we can imagine all of the different elements of these shows being their own stories. And so we create stories around all of those elements because we use our own imaginations and go, we love what George did. We want to do the same thing. And unfortunately, for the storytellers that are playing in this world, you have to actually collapse that into a smaller space, and you have to go, I'm telling a story about Ahsoka, right? Like, or about Sabine. I'm not telling a story about all of these other folks who appear in the galaxy, and then that can be disappointing as fans because our imaginations have run away, right? They've run away, and they're going on a different path.
And speaking of disappointment, just as a disclaimer, folks, when Jay says George's imagination, he's referring to George Lucas. It is not mine. Because if you wanted to see what was inside my mind, you would need an entry fee to do so. So it's
Citrus George has his own imagination, and it's awesome too, but it's very different. So let's talk about there's a couple things we brought up that related to this topic, but let's jump into the Dave Filoni Star Wars. What are your thoughts about Dave Filoni Star Wars? OG, I think I need to start with you this time.
Sure.
Let's compare Dave Filoni Star Wars to George Lucas Star Wars to Tony Gilroy Star Wars. I mean, you can take J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson if you want to. What do you think about Dave Filoni and how he fits into the creative space of Star Wars?
I think Filoni is brilliant in so many ways. I like I mentioned earlier in the show, I really like how he does this sort of Filoni's really good at like introducing characters and then like as it goes on, getting you really super invested. He has a knack for that. So I think he's brilliant in that regard. Absolutely brilliant. I think he also has a knack for like connective tissue. Like when you watch Rebels, a lot of fans were going through that show and they were like, what's this space whale stuff? Like this has like, what is this filler episode about space whales? And it turns out it's like the biggest, like that's the thing at the end. I mean, it wasn't a filler episode at all. Right. So Filoni's really good at that as well, where he can kind of sprinkle in these little elements. And then what you think might be a nothing throwaway thing ends up being a big thing at the end. I think he's really, 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 really good at that. A couple of the things I don't like about Filoni, and this has bothered me for a really long time. There's elements of Filoni Star Wars that doesn't feel like Star Wars. I know a lot of fans say that, and it's a very subjective thing, but I don't like his he kind of is obsessed with like spray painted helmets and things like that. Like for some reason, like in Rebels and all that stuff, you see, and Bad Batch, right? You see all this spray painted stuff. And I'm like, for some reason, and I can't really even explain why. It doesn't feel like Star Wars. It feels like our world, the spray paint thing. And he's constantly introducing that, and I don't know why. You didn't see any of that in the original trilogy, and it just feels kind of jarring when you have these elements in the animation that are kind of like bumping up against these other elements of the live action, and the live action doesn't have any of that, but for some reason all the animation has it all over the place. It feels kind of weird. I wish he would kind of get off that kick. It just doesn't really work for me personally. But overall, I am a Filoni fan. I do like his storytelling abilities. I think he is good at that. I think he understands Star Wars for the most part. Look, no one's going to be. You're never going to find like a clone of George Lucas. Like eventually, you're going to have to move on from. As fans, we're going to have to move on from Lucas, right? Because anyone that takes over, as much as they understand Star Wars, like a Filoni, there's always going to be, it's a different person. So there's always going to be a little bit of their fingerprint on it. And we just have to kind of accept that. It's kind of like Walt Disney. You know, we talk a lot about Disney here on the channel. It's like, you know, the man died 50 plus years ago, you know, while we can kind of make new content that's very much in the vein of the content he made when he was alive. It's still going to have that fingerprint of these new creators on it. It's not going to be Walt to a T. So I think as like Star Wars fans, we kind of have to understand that, you know, there's not going to be another George Lucas. So I think Filoni is as close as we can get to that. I think he does a very good job at it, not without his flaws. You know, I'm not like all in on the Filoni thing, like I said, with the spray paint and all that, but I think he does a good job. I really do. I mean, I trust him for the most part. Some of the stuff he does too, like the world between worlds, I think it's a cool concept, a cool idea, but I think it is a little bit of a slippery slope. That whole thing. So again, there's questionable creative choices, even with this show. Oh gosh, we didn't even bring it up, but the crawl or I don't even know what that is. The
non-crawl crawl. Yeah.
The non-crawl crawl. That was kind of weird. I don't know if that was a Filoni thing, but that was kind of weird. If you're gonna do, like, here's the thing: either do it or don't. Like, if you're not gonna do the crawl, then don't have a crawl at all. Do what you were doing with Rogue One and all these other ones, where it's just, you know, a cold intro, whatever. You just do the title card. Yeah. If you're gonna do the crawl, then do the crawl. Yeah. Like this whole thing about like. That just made no sense to me. Like the whole novelty of Star Wars when it premiered in '77 was that crawl wasn't like a normal crawl that you saw in every other Hollywood film. The fact that it went in like that made it special. So I really don't understand. And then they're like, oh, we'll make it red so it's even cooler. It's like, no, it's not. I don't know. That was a weird decision. Really weird decision.
You know what I wish they would have done with Ahsoka is I wish that he would have brought in the Clone Wars news, like the old school news reporting.
Yes.
Like, on this corner of the galaxy, we got the Jedi, and then like that whole thing. Like I think that would have been really cool to see in live action. Like he could have like ported that over. That would have been fun. So before I get to you, Retro, one more question for you, OG, in regards to Dave Filoni. Who is your favorite post-George Lucas storyteller within Star Wars, if you had to pick one?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so we have Filoni, we got Rian Johnson, we got JJ.
You put Favreau in there. You know what
Favreau. I mean? You know, I think the most fun I've had with Star Wars since Lucas, I would say, would be Mando.
Yeah.
So, Mando. I mean, I think that really encapsulated, like, the spirit of this franchise. So... Mm-hmm. It would have to be, I guess you would have to say Favreau and Filoni, I guess, together. I mean, they birthed that whole thing. So I think those are my two favorite creators. I think they did a really, really good job at that. And again, they're not perfect, but I think they do. I think they're the closest we have to Lucas right now. If you look at the chessboard, not JJ. Not JJ. It's Rian Johnson. I respect him a lot because he took swings. He did. He took a lot of heat, but he took risks, and I can respect anyone who takes risk in life. I mean that was pretty cool. So his decisions weren't always there, but he took the risk, and I appreciate the balls that he had for that. But no, it's not him though. Who else is in there? Tony Gilroy. I think Tony is really talented. I think Rogue One was fantastic. I think Andor was fantastic. But I think the problem with Tony is that it's a little bit I think Tony's lacking a little bit of the fun factor in Star Wars. I think it's a little dry.
Yeah.
You don't have like when you watch Star Wars, you have the R2, the lovable, moments with little R2. When you watch Mando, you got the little Grogu. There's those like kind of like those softer moments.
Mhm.
I don't think Tony really gets that. He doesn't understand that like cute, like fun charm that Star Wars has. It's all business. You know what I'm saying? But he's good. I mean, he's talented. I like Andor a lot, but I mean, he's missing that. But yeah, I think Favreau and Filoni right now. I think post Lucas are the guys. I together they're fantastic. Go ahead, George.
OG, do you feel like Favreau and Filoni are better as a duo rather than them being separate?
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm.
That's interesting. I don't really know because Favreau has done some pretty good stuff on his own, like Rebels and stuff. Oh man, that's a tough one, George. Damn, you're trying to stump me, huh? I don't know. I mean, they're both geniuses. I mean, I guess what? I guess if I were to have to pick, I guess I'd want them as a team. I think Mando was just phenomenal. So I think Mando hit all the right Star Wars notes in so many ways. Yeah, I think I'd take him as a team if I could.
Yeah, I think Tony Gilroy does not give a F about Star Wars, and that's kind of why I like him. I might pick Tony Gilroy as my personal favorite storyteller of there because he's not trying to be Lucas in any way, shape, or form. He's just like, This is what I would want to see if I was going to do a space show, and he does what he wants to see, and I like it. Richard, what do you think? What do you think of Dave Filoni, and then who would you pick as your favorite Star Wars storyteller?
Dave is. I think animation, doing the animation and then also live action just has a completely different feel for me. So of course he was incredible with animation, but I definitely have a different feeling. Like the first episode, to me, one of the reasons why I had such a big problem with it was the pacing of that. And it's just like the way things kind of like took a really there was a tension on certain things, but also there was like a lot of lull space, which I think maybe could be attributed to editing. You could edit that like a little firmer, a little tighter, in my opinion. Maybe that's not all his fault, but maybe, I don't know. I think he has something to do with like making sure the entire package looks, really pulled together. So that was my thing with that. I don't have a lot of experience with him as like doing live action, so it's really hard to say if he's in the one that would have the right would have the franchise in the right hands. But there is really no other person that really feels like they speak in George Lucas's language, that is like basically like cut from his rib almost. Like he's really had the most conversations with Lucas about the franchise, and really has a great understanding of things. Maybe even all of us like don't have an understanding of, with like the prequels, what he was able to extrapolate from that is just jaw dropping. I think it's really he has a very powerful creative vision. And it's kind of weird that I'm not feeling that in these first 3 episodes. So I'm like, I hope it's not a live action thing, And they also had many episodes to build that up in animation, where here we've got 8 episodes.
True.
So I don't know, like maybe he needs more time to cook.
You bring up a great point, Retro Nerd Girl. Like that's a fantastic point. Like I talked a lot about how like Filoni knows how to really like by the end of it you're in. But that's a great point. With Rebels, you had a lot more episodes. You only got 8 here. You got to really you got to get to the point a little faster. That's a great point. Fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Like I mean, the thing that I'm really hoping is that we do get that payoff on the next couple of episodes. The next to the end. But I have high hopes for whatever he's going to be doing, especially with the movie. It's in much better hands than I think elsewhere. And so I think he's the best chance with that. And just like developing what's next for the franchise, maybe like let him kind of guide what's to happen, sort of like Feige did. Instead of like, okay, you're just going to do one movie and somebody over there will do their movie with another idea, but you're in the same time area. I think all of this should have one voice, and that was definitely the issue with the sequels that really took it down a really bad road. I'm sure all of the movies made money, so people went to go see those movies. But critically, they really suffered because they just didn't have any cohesion. It felt like different directors were directing the movies. It had different tones. It didn't really feel like it was crafted. It needs to feel like we're really dealing with a master craft here when we're watching these movies, and we're not. Like at the end of the first movie, I'm not trying to deviate too much, but the first movie from the sequels, Force Awakens, I had about 22 questions about what was going to happen. And none of them were really answered, or they were just thrown away or discarded. And so that's really heartbreaking for a fan to experience that. We should get the answers, and then maybe there may be some new questions being brought up in the process. But, don't forget about the interest that we have. So I think Dave can actually do that. I think he can fulfill that as a storyteller. It's just making sure he has the right project. And I think Filoni, actually, I think that Favreau could be helping him along the way, because Favreau really knows movies. He knows how to, put together great movies. So if it's movies, I think we'll be in really great hands. It's the TV show, the seasons that I really have a problem with Disney, and just in general. They're really having a problem figuring out how to make these serial shows. Just seems to boggle my mind after watching Mando 3 and Secret Invasion. I was like, what's going on here? This doesn't make sense, because you have the story, like all of the elements of the story is there, but it's not being fulfilled. It's almost like somebody is just having a group saying, hey, let's have the character do this, and let's have the characters do this, let's have the characters do this. But we never get inside the characters and learn why they're doing what they're doing, and to the point where we actually feel something for these characters. It's important for us to have that empathy for the protagonists, and definitely for the villains as well. We need that, and it's missing.
Yeah. No, 100% retro. And like the thing too is like this is one thing that you're absolutely right on with the money when it comes to like the Star Wars Disney stuff. It just feels like a lot of people don't really know what they're doing with these shows, right? And it's like you watch something like Succession, and it's like just each episode is a total banger. It's just like, I mean, I can binge watch that whole series, and like I wouldn't even feel it. It's just so good. You watch stuff like, I don't know if you guys have seen Queen Charlotte. I love that show. I love Queen Charlotte. And I could go through each episode and I don't even know. Oh, wow. It's already 6:00 and I started at, it doesn't, I just can burn through them. I mean, they're just so good. Each one is great, great, great. Disney Plus shows, not just Star Wars, but a lot of their stuff, they kind of like, they're a little bit on that struggle bus. Like they don't have that same, like Netflix, whoever they have in charge of whatever they're doing, a lot of their shows, they're bangers, and they're like, there's no filler, there's no nonsense. It's just each episode is great. I really hope Disney, with all their resources, can kind of like pull some of these people in, whoever Netflix has, I don't know, and bring them in and like get like some sort of like, it just feels a little bit of, it just seems like Netflix has a better grasp on this whole thing, you know, and creating these TV shows and whatnot.
Even HBO Max is doing a fantastic job, and you know, their House of Dragons, that was incredible. That blew my socks off. And it's like it is a formula that they're using that is defunct. I think it just doesn't seem to be working. Somebody may have had a great idea. Oh, we should do it like this from now on. And it like every show is just suffering. So it's kind of hard. But I love the.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. Well, I do love the team up of Favreau and Filoni. So I think that would be my choice too.
That's your choice. Yeah, I love it. I love it. That's awesome. I do think you guys are onto something, because the reality is, whether it be the HBO shows, HBO has, I don't know, probably since the 80s has a record of doing amazing shows, right? AMC for the last couple decades, I know that some of their shows have gone on for too long, but the ones that they've ended on time, whether it was Mad Men or Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, I mean, that production studio, Breaking Bad is like a masterpiece of both pacing and like every episode ends on like something that you just got to keep watching it. So it's odd to me that Disney has all the money in the world. They could just we're in a strike right now. So first of all, Disney pay people to produce these shows, but also pay the people who are awesome at doing this. We know who they are, and they can coach other people. You know, like, I don't know. It's a weird one.
I think that's actually Disney's problem, though. I think not even just with Star Wars, but with anything that they produce, it's almost like the people that are in the company right now, they have this mentality of saying, okay, it's the Disney brand. It has the name of Disney on it. So we're good. People will go see it. It's all that. It's like, what happened to the tenacity of trying to make a good show, trying to make a good movie? It's like they have to get out of the way of just looking at Disney as a brand name and take it as the banner of producing good shit. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I'm going to go balls to the wall.
Yeah. No, you should have some pride in, like, this is a company that Walt Disney founded. He built this company from the ground up. Have some pride in that and make the best content you can make. Don't ride coattails, you know. Oh, it's got the Disney name. Oh, it's all good, you know. Like, really deliver, you know.
Yeah, where's the excellence? It's missing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. I got a couple of thoughts on Filoni, but let's hear yours, Citrus George. And also, who do you love the most in the Star Wars storytelling universe here?
So for me, I do enjoy Filoni's style, minus what OG was saying. Those like spray painted type of gangster type thing, like that throws me off for Star Wars. Like, do that for Star Trek, not Star Wars.
Star Trek.
Don't do it to Star Trek, please.
Yeah, the Star Trek fans are like, no, not over here.
No.
But I do love how both OG and Retro Nerd Girl, had mentioned of how Filoni can kind of like interconnect the stories of previous stories that we have already seen, and how he can create a storyline that flows through to kind of give us answers that we may not have known within the original movies. And that's why I have high hopes for Ahsoka. You know, I'm not holding my breath, but being that he is at the helm of this, I feel like that he is going to deliver, of giving us something where it's not just going to be us on a cliffhanger saying, okay, why did we watch these 8 episodes when it's going to end like that? You know, so I feel like that there is going to be some meat and potatoes into this empty pot right now, so to speak, for the show. As far as the Star Wars universe in general, no one can touch George Lucas. That's his baby. This was his creation. You know, that's like, if I was to create something, I have a vision within my own mind of how I want this to go. If I pass it along to somebody else, they're going to put their own twist to it. They're going to put their own interpretation on it. I mean, hell, if I had a product and I sold it for $4 billion, turn it into a musical for all I care. I got the $4 billion. It's like, I'm good. But at the same time, I would hope that, whoever I pass that product along, that they would respect and honor of what my philosophy was to the story and the characters. And I feel like that's where it gets lost in translation, especially when it gets passed along to so many people at one given time. It's like Star Wars has been handed around more times in a year to so many people that, as I said, it's lost in translation. So to my own question that I gave to OG, I prefer Filoni and Favreau together. I think that they are a tremendous duo. They work. Their partnership is phenomenal. I mean, they do very good projects separately, but I think that just like how Walton, Roy, Eisner, and Wells, I think that Favreau and Filoni do very well as a partnership. With Tony, that's. I think he's just like, they just hand him the project and he's like, okay, let me just do this and be done with it. I think that's his style. I really don't think that his strong point is let me create some extra feeling to these characters. It's just like, let me just go by what they're asking me to do. I'll do it and be done with it. JJ and Ryan, I feel like for JJ, I felt like he was trying to be too much like George Lucas. I felt like Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker was sort of kind of like a repetitive notion to the original. And it was like, but we want something new. So I do agree with OG. That's where I kind of can understand where Rian Johnson was going, because he was trying to do something different and new. But I felt like he kind of got in his own head and he just overdone it. And it's like, then we get The Last Jedi.
Well, it's like Disney animation. It's like you want to do movies that are that kind of are reminiscent of like what Walt did, but you don't want to copy beat for beat. So, for example, when the Renaissance came around in the late 80s, early 90s, it was movies that were like, okay, these movies could sit on the same shelf as the movies that Walt did, but they're not like beat by beat the same kind of movie. So like a Beauty and the Beast is very much a new thing, and it was refreshing at the time, and it was new, but it felt familiar at the same time. But it wasn't like anything that you saw necessarily with Walt Disney's era, but it felt in the same vein as a Walt Disney era. You want to do the same thing with this. Like, you don't want to copy beat for beat. But you want to also be like in the same vein as what what George did in the 70s and the 80s. And that's a hard thing to do. I know I'm making light of it. Like, oh, that's easy. It's not easy. Animation has gone through this many times with Disney. It's not easy to hit all those notes. The Renaissance era was definitely a unicorn for sure. But like with Star Wars, it's tough. But yeah, that's exactly right, George. You gotta hit the spirit of the franchise, but you can't go in there and be like, oh, okay, so we had a Death Star before, so now we'll have what was it called? Star Killer Base, I believe it was. Now. Yeah, it's like, come on, like that's just a cheap copy. Like, you have to you got to be creative, but it has to be like in the same vein as what came before it. So it's a tough balancing act for sure.
Yeah,
exactly. And to touch upon what Retro Nerd Girl was saying about the series as opposite to the movies, as much as the films had a lot of issues, going forward, but I think it's just because of a lot of creative differences, passing it along to different directors and different writers and what have you. For as far as the series go, I feel like they haven't found their niche yet of how to fit this storyline within an 8 to 10 episode type of series. I feel like that they kind of relied on their laurels with Mandalorian. It was like Mandalorian was like a smash hit right out of the gate when Disney Plus premiered. So it's like, okay, we'll do more of these. But it's like sometimes if you don't get that lightning in a bottle, it's not going to happen every single time. And I feel like with Kenobi and the Book of Boba Fett, even though that they were okay, but it's like, okay, so let's try it again. We didn't do it right the last time, so let's create another series and see if we get it right this time. It's like, if you're going to do it, make sure you know what you're doing and piece it in together so you have a cohesive story.
Yeah.
And I had one other thought about this, is sort of goes back to the Obi-Wan series, and I was thinking about that for this series. It specials, special movies that they had, like Werewolf by Night, which was amazing. I love that. There's a possibility of just doing one small story for 2 hours and just knock everybody's socks off right away. And I don't know if it's about viewing numbers, getting those numbers racked up, like how many people are coming in every week, or they're just trying to milk it for these stories and stretch them out for as much as they can. But I think it's gonna be shoot them in the foot on the long run if people are looking at this and saying, I don't want to sit through another series, no matter how good it is. And that's why Andor didn't have as great numbers, because a lot of people weren't even willing to look at Andor because they had been burned by Boba Fett. And same thing along the lines of Mando 3, the numbers keep going down. And I don't know, it's really frustrating because there's so many nuggets of good stuff in these things. And if there just were tighter, more put together, and just you can actually see like some really incredible entertainment piece that you could get out of it, but you've got to sit through all the other bad stuff. So.
And the series kind of and the series kind of frustrates me, not just with Ahsoka, but just in general. For me, I'll go back and I'll rewatch a movie. How many times? Like, there's how many times I've seen the Star Wars movies. I don't necessarily go back and watch the series. When I'm done, it's like a one and done. Like when I complete Mando season 1, I don't go back and rewatch it all the way from the beginning again. It's like, I don't have time for that. It's like they keep on stretching it out. So it's like when it's a film, like a 2.5 hour film, I'll watch it, wait a while, and then I'll go back and watch it. But when you keep stretching it as a series where you're prolonging this thing, it's like it's one and done for me. And that's where I have an issue constantly when you have a series. I don't mind having a series, but you have to do it with everything. It's like it becomes monotonous. And actually, to Retro Nerd Girl, it's funny that you mentioned about sometimes just doing a one and done. The Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special was absolutely phenomenal. Like James Gunn, like he just said, you know what, I'm just going to do this Christmas special. It's going to kind of tie into the original Guardians of the Galaxy storyline, but I'm just going to make it my own. If you watch it, you watch it. You don't, you don't. It's like, and I felt like that had more of an impact than doing an 8-episode series on something that it's like after you get midpoint, it's like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
It's tough. True. It's not easy. It's not an easy job. And I don't know. I think they need to look at what Netflix is doing, because a lot of Netflix's original content is they're just hitting home run after home run. Yeah. And they're doing something right. They got somebody in there making all the right decisions. So Disney, you got the resources, figure it out. I'm sure you can figure it out.
Netflix also has this thing where they have enough irons in the fire, where if they have a show that's not very good that comes out, they just hide it in the algorithm, man, and you don't even know that it exists. But Disney doesn't have that luxury, because Disney's kind of like, you've got to watch all the new stuff, otherwise you'll cancel your subscription, right? So they do.
That's a fair point, Jay, because also it's like the Disney stuff, and I've talked about this so much on the channel, is under a microscope.
Yeah.
So Netflix can churn out a bunch of stuff, like you said, irons in the fire, and it goes under the radar. You're not going to have a million YouTube videos on random original thing from Netflix.
Right.
You know, it's only like Squid Game and like the heavy hitters that actually get any kind of play. Yeah. But with Disney, it's like anything Star Wars is gonna like be all over them, like everywhere. Anything MCU or Marvel is gonna be everywhere. They can't hide from it. It's like right there, you know.
Yeah, and so getting back to the question about Dave Filoni too, I have a little bit different of an opinion about George Lucas than most people in the Star Wars fandom. I think that George Lucas is the most imaginative executive producer in probably the history of film and television. Like, the guy's imagination to give us Star Wars, to give us American Graffiti, to give us Indiana Jones, my favorite franchise. I mean, this guy is just pumping out the hits, right?
Yes,
However, Willow, exactly. He's just across the board. He's awesome. However, George Lucas is a below average director.
Oh, yeah.
George Lucas is a below average writer. Like, this guy is not like very good at those particular things. So here's the problem I have with Dave Filoni, and it's a blessing and a curse, because I think Dave Filoni is the rightful heir to the George Lucas empire. He is the guy who has the literal apprenticeship from George Lucas. However, Dave Filoni, the thing that he bothers me about is that he likes to take everything that George told him as like, this is the gospel truth about what Star Wars is, and he does not deviate from it. And the problem I have with that is George Lucas had some bad ideas. He had some continuity issues. He gave us the prequels that we didn't really ask for and didn't really like all that much. And I think the fandom forgets some of that stuff. But like, it's happening to me now in Ahsoka. So when I look at Dave Filoni, I go, Dave Filoni, I wish would be like, just take over and do what you want to do, Dave. Because when you get into some of the Star Wars lore that actually makes no sense on its face, it bugs the hell out of me. My dog's really upset about it, in fact.
Now, can you repeat that? Because your corgi is so cute, it distracted me.
He's like, can you let me out of this room? I'm tired of talking about Star Wars. But Dave Filoni, I'll give you an example. He went pretty hard on something that I think Star Wars should pretty much just ignore. And that is, he said, anybody can use the Force. Ahsoka came out and said, anybody can use the Force. And I go, why don't you make everything more confusing for us? Because if everybody can use the Force, then exactly how does the Force work? Because you also gave us midichlorians and said those people are better at the Force than those people over there. So now everyone can use it. Okay, fine. But then you have the Sith who like they take the Force and bend it to their will, whereas you have the Jedi who take the Force and then you let the Force flow through them to do the Force's will. I'm like, hang on. We're getting too in the weeds here with how the Force works. Don't give me that stuff. But he loves that stuff. World Between Worlds. He gives us the Bendu. He gives all these things that I'm like, look, stay away from those things, because those things don't make a lot of sense in Star Wars, and it's not. So I love Dave Filoni's world building. I love that he's taken on the mantle of George Lucas, but I also think that he is kind of. He goes too far into the George Lucas-ness of everything, and it just is too much for me. So I think that's why I find it refreshing to see somebody like Tony Gilroy, who is amazing and just says, I'm playing in this sandbox, but I'm going to do my thing in this sandbox and be good at that. So I'm going to pick Tony Gilroy right now as my preferred person to watch it play with the Star Wars universe. Oh. But I respect the hell out of Filoni. I just want him to be... I want him to be less George Lucas and more Dave Filoni, if that makes sense.
That's fair. That's fair. Because you can kind of get into this thing where you can sort of like, you get into like this. And again, I hate to bring this up again, but it's kind of true. When Disney animation was not doing well, they were obsessed with recreating Walt and what Walt wanted. It was this obsession over like, what would Walt do? What would Walt do? And in that process of what would Walt do, it never really hit the same. And when the animators and the creative sort of kind of went off that and sort of said, you know what, we're going to do what we want to do. We're going to be in the same vein as Walt, but we're not going to get upset in the weeds with every decision with what would Walt do. They made a better product. So,
and that's why Beauty and the Beast became the success that it did, Because even back in the day, Walt tried doing Beauty and the Beast, and he couldn't get the story right. He tried it so many times and kept on putting the book back on the shelf. It just, story wasn't working, characters wasn't working, and it wasn't until many years later, you know, when Eisner and Wells came in, and then even to his credit, you know, Jeffrey Katzenberg, you know, I mean, but we all have strong feelings about him. But I mean, like, at the time, it's, you know, they did what they had to do at the time, and that's what made it a success. And I feel like that, and I do agree with you, Jay, that's where Star Wars right now is lacking, because people are going so much into their own head of saying, okay, it has to be this. So if it was created by this 40 some years ago, let's add more to that, and let's like make it more confusing. I bet you even the creators are getting confused about what they're creating in their own heads. It's like just keep it as simple where it can flow nicely. You know, it's just, I don't.
To me, to that point, George, to me, Filoni would be ideally suited to be in the Feige role. Because it's like, look, I understand all of the Star Wars. So Tony Gilroy, you want to play in Star Wars? Just run your ideas by me. I'll tell you, like, we'll shape it a little bit. We'll say, this character, how should they behave in this context? How does the Force interact with these people? And then those storytellers who go, yeah, I'm not going to have Ahsoka tell somebody that anybody can use the Force, because that's going to cause confusion. So I'm going to leave that out. It's like world building that we don't need almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We need to know what the motivations of the bad guys are, but we don't need to know that anyone can use the Force. Like we've already heard, like, that's a George Lucas thing that goes all the way back to Return of the Jedi in an interview that he just said because he wanted to say, you know? But I think we sometimes just put George Lucas on a pedestal, and it's like, look, the guy is amazing, don't get me wrong, but he needed a lot of amazing people around him to make the amazing stuff he made.
Concept to execution.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and a perfect example of like taking what George Lucas kind of started and like doing your own thing, having the freedom and not being totally married to every word George Lucas does is Star Wars Visions. That's
wow.
Yeah.
Right? And that's exactly what like, okay, so you take the concept of Star Wars, that, you know, but then you go with it, but you're not totally chained to every rule and regulation because it's not canon, you know, and there's that creative freedom. And I love what they did with that show. Season 1 was amazing with all the anime. Season 2 had anime too, but it was a little bit more of a mix. They did phenomenal with that stuff, and I think that's kind of like, you're right, Jay. That's where I think Filoni is sort of kind of missing it a little bit. Like, you're too by the book. You're too like, everything is like a calculation. Like the George Lucas. Oh, I don't know. He said this that day in 1992. We can't do that one. You know, it's like, come on, man.
Exactly. Now I do want to be careful of your time, Retro Nerd Girl. How much more time do you got to hang out with us?
I've got about 45 minutes.
Okay, cool. That's plenty of time. I just know that we as the Story Geeks crew, we can go on for hours and hours and hours. So I got to be careful with guest time. So let's talk about this. I want to talk about the best elements of this show and the worst elements of this show. And you can just anything that you're feeling like I had some other topics that we'll get to in a future show. But if you want to touch on Ahsoka's personality, you know, I think it was George that referenced Ashley Eckstein voicing her and what she was like when she was younger, but now she's older and now she's played by Rosario Dawson, who I also, by the way, love. So if you want to get into that, feel free to get into that. The comparison between Rebels in this show, anything you want to get into. But what are some of the best elements of this show, and what are some of the worst elements of this show? Retro, we'll start with you.
The best elements of this show right now for me is I would say both the best and the worst is the pacing, because sometimes it's really amazing and then sometimes it's not. But if I can get away from the pacing, I would say one of the things that really kind of irritate me about this show is how much I'm not really feeling like I'm loving, like, I love the performance of Ahsoka. I love the idea of Ahsoka. I want to know more about her emotionally. Like, I want to tap into her emotional state a little bit more, so she doesn't feel like a side character. Now, I know that we're going to get something with Anakin at some point, so that could reveal a lot more, and so that's why I'm still hopeful. And there is a lot on the good side that we can expect, possibly, that of course will lead up to Thrawn and getting to this other galaxy, and what is there. That's sort of intriguing me right now, like wondering what's in that other galaxy. Has Thrawn already taken over that galaxy and has gotten some sort of Force user to talk to the witch? And so I am really it's got me interested. So with any of the faults that it may have, it still has me interested.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good way to say it. George, what do you think? What do you like? What do you not like about this show?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same track as Retro Nerd Girl. It's like I'm very optimistic about where it's going because I am invested in Ahsoka as a character, and I feel like that's where I'm gripping on to this series, that Filoni can lead us into something that could be quite interesting. I feel like if this was a character that didn't already have an arc where we watched her in the animated series, I probably already would have tapped out by after episode 3, because I'm not seeing any extra character arc in Ahsoka right now in this particular series. But because she does have a strong character arc in the animated series, I want to see more in the live action. As far as Rosario Dawson, phenomenal actress, by the way, and as I said, I feel like she can portray Ahsoka very well. I do feel like, however, they need to allow her to expand on that character within herself, to kind of have her feel out Ahsoka and have her bring it her own, because Ashley did a phenomenal job at voicing her in the animated series. So I feel like Rosario hasn't had that time yet to kind of make it her own. And as I said, and it's nothing against her, as I said, she's a phenomenal actress. I mean, I loved her in Frank Miller's Sin City. You know, it's like, but I do feel like the story needs to be flushed out, and I don't know what direction it's going. I do have high hopes, just like Retro Nerd Girl, but I have to wait and see, because again, a lot of these Star Wars series, I get pumped up with it, and then by the time at the end of Act 2 into the beginning of Act 3, it's like it flatlines.
Yeah, it's interesting.
What do you think?
Yeah, actually, for me, some of the best stuff for this whole series is the cast. I mean, obviously, Ray Stevenson. I mean, rest in peace. Like, that horrible story, what happened with him, but he has been really fantastic in this show. I really love his character, Balin. Love his stuff. I love the Shin Heidi character. Awesome. I think Natasha Liu Bordizzo has done a fantastic job as Sabine. I really, really think she's like just hit a total home run with her portrayal of Sabine. I love her little, what is it? The Loth cat, you know?
Oh, he's so cute.
It's adorable. I love that. Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in this show, and it feels, I think for the most part, it feels very Star Warsy, you know? It really does. It feels very Star Warsy. But I agree with what you guys are saying, in that I think we're at a point now, 3 episodes in, and we got to start stepping it up a little bit, you know, kind of get a little meat on them bones, you know. I think that it's cool. Like, everything we're seeing is cool aesthetically, it's beautiful, the whole thing. I just think we need to kind of flesh it out now. So let's see. We got 5 more episodes. Mm-hmm. Let's see what Filoni and his crew is cooking, you know, because I think that's kind of like, I think Nerd Girl, you brought up a fantastic point. You know, Filoni does a great job at kind of like getting people invested. But when you have an animated show that has 20, 30, 40 episodes in multiple seasons, you can do that. With this one, only 8. We only got 5 more left. So they got to deliver. You got to start showing the goods very, very soon. I think it's off to a good start, a decent start, but I think you got to start ramping it up a little bit. So I'm optimistic. I am. I like this show. George, like, I agree with you. I think Rosario is awesome. Tough shoes to fill with Ashley. Actually, George, your friend, gosh, I forgot her name. Is it Allison or Alicia? Who is Elisa. Kind of looks like Ashley, to be honest with you. She kind of has that Ashley vibe.
She does. Yeah, she does. Yeah, she really does.
Yeah, it totally reminds me of her. But no, I don't want to digress too far. But like, yeah, I think the show is great. I think it's off to a good start, but I think they need to ramp it up now. You got to start delivering. You got to start giving us some substance. And that's the thing with Disney Plus shows, is that a lot of times it's like WandaVision, right? WandaVision started off like, oh my God, this is a banger. Like, this is crazy. It kind of petered out by the end, and I don't want this to happen with this show. So we'll see. I'm optimistic. I'm generally an optimistic person. I'm not a doom and gloom kind of guy typically. But in this case, I'm concerned. But I'm not like, oh my God, it's the end. Like, I think that, they could still do it. Like, I got hope here. In classic Star Wars fashion, I have hope. We'll see.
Classic Star Wars fashion. I like that. For me, best and worst. I like Dave Filoni doing a series. I think Dave Filoni has earned himself the ability to do a series with what he's done with the animated stuff and working alongside Filoni or Favreau. I think that the best of the show is Filoni. The worst of the show is Filoni. And I think that as long as we can get him concentrated on some of the better elements, I think he is in all of the animated series and Retro Nerd Girl and OG, you've both pointed this out. His shows have hit or miss episodes.
Yeah.
He has a banger episode. He has an episode where you go, why did I watch that? I mean, I feel like I want to watch the Clone Wars in like, here, these are the recommended episodes. You can skip all the ones that don't matter, right? Like, because that's kind of how I feel about some of those episodes. I want the basic storytelling to be solidified, and I don't care about as much about the world building. And I think right now we're topsy-turvy on that, right? So he's filling in all the world building. He's saying, by the way, Night Sisters are here. By the way, Jedi Order is represented by Hu Yang, the droid, who's awesome, by the way. We've got some other things that I'm introducing, guys. You guys stick with me. World building. Okay, cool. But the storytelling has to be the premier thing for the next 5 episodes. Because if it's not, then we get into these just little things of where he's just trying to make it a cool moment. One of the things I was making fun of, and by the way, I have to give a shout out to Captain John D, because he and I had we were exchanging DMs about why or why not we felt like Filoni should be the heir apparent to the Star Wars empire. And he actually thinks that Filoni is too much of a copycat of George, where he thinks that it's he's trying to be George so much that it's like you can't be, and therefore it comes off wrong, right?
Right.
And I don't think he's wrong about that, but I also think that Dave Filoni to me feels like Star Wars a lot. So I have a slightly different opinion there, because I don't know, it feels like Star Wars to me. If you ask me who's the best George Lucas in the world that isn't George Lucas, it's Dave Filoni, right? But I think that what was I going to say? I was ranting about something. Oh, I was ranting about here we got to find a map to find a person. I'm like, well, that's what the sequel trilogy was. I mean, like, we got to find a map to find a person. Like, and so to me, I go, that's fine. You can use all the tropes you want to use in Star Wars. I don't mind. But I do need the basic storytelling elements. These people are motivated to do this thing for these reasons. These people do not want them to accomplish that. And for these reasons. And it's really important. And that's where conflict comes from. We're trying to get some conflict right now, because we were trying to get some conflict with between Sabine and Ahsoka. And you guys have already said this, but it almost feels more like Sabine's show than it does feel like Ahsoka's show.
Oh, it's her show.
Yeah, so it's like you've got this conflict between them, but you're kind of like, I mean, all this conflict. What to my knowledge, even though I haven't finished all of Rebels, didn't really happen on screen. So you had this apprentice relationship, and you kind of didn't work out. But like, why didn't it work out? We don't know.
Exactly.
We don't know. So like,
tell us.
Yeah, tell us. Bring that into it. Show us some flashbacks of when you didn't get along and when you got in a fight. And now we know why there's tension. Because right now it's all to your point very early in the show, Retro. It's all very much mystery box with. But the one thing that we need to know about the mystery box is why do the characters want these things? Because without that, we're just kind of left in limbo watching events happen and not being able to piece them together in our brains around a story. So I think that he'll get there because I think that I agree with you, OG. You just need to give Dave his time, and if Dave has his time, he'll get you there, right?
Let him cook. Let him cook.
Yeah, let him cook. It's kind of like George Lucas in that regard, where there's some scenes where you're like, "Why did you include that, George?" But if you eventually work it out, you go, "Okay, cool. Yeah, you pulled it off in the end." So we'll see how it all shapes out. But we will be here. We will be here talking about. It's not just an hour and a half worth of Ahsoka. We're going to be here every week talking about Ahsoka. So we'll get into all the rest of the things that we need to talk about. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us, Retro Nerd Girl. Thank you for stopping in. We've been trying to get Retro on a show for probably 4 or 5 months, I think. So it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Now I'll just let everybody go around and tell people where you can find you and where they can share their own thoughts about what we're talking about here with Ahsoka. So Retro Nerd Girl, why don't you start it out? Tell people what you're up to. Tell people where they can find you.
You can find me on YouTube at Retro Nerd Girl, and there I do videos of retro content or retro movies. Reviewing retro movies. I do live streams on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. You can find me also on the formerly known platform Twitter, now X, and and that's about it. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Definitely go give Retro Nerd Girl a follow. And check out some of the retro content that she's reviewing. That sounds really cool. I gotta go watch some of those.
And all her links will be down below. So definitely check her out, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff.
Perfect.
Cool.
Perfect. And then you got Citrus George, the one and only Citrus George, back from his whirlwind tour around. Basically, he was like the three amigos going around on the world tour here, and he's got Citrus Corner. And he's talking about Florida parks a lot. And in fact, he's been on OG show a bunch lately talking about the goings on at Disney. So George, what do you got coming up for us and what can we expect from you?
So coming up with Citrus Corner, we got a lot in the pipeline, not even just with Walt Disney World, but with the upcoming newest Disney cruise ship, the Disney Treasure, is going to unveil some extra hidden secrets of more in depth about what's going to go on with the new ship. Disney Parks is going to unveil the Disney Treasure this September 5th at 11 a.m. Eastern time.
A few days from now.
Yes. So it's like the anticipation. It was supposed to be on August 31st or the 30th, sorry, but because of the storms down in Florida, they decided to postpone it till the 5th. So we're definitely going to talk some in-depth of the Disney Treasure because we have some of our own theories on that as well. And then also with the D23 Destination D that's going to be held at the Contemporary at Walt Disney World. They're going to do a live stream of that as well. So Josh tomorrow is going to be there, and they kind of reworded some things differently with the Disney parks. So I'm curious to see if we're going to get any kind of news, something to put in the pipeline. Because I mean, right now it's very bleak. So crossing our fingers. So that's what we have to look forward to. Possibly some big news coming out for the Disney parks and the Disney Cruise Line. So definitely keep an eye out. We're going to cover it on Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner. And if you want to follow me, you could do so on X at Disney George. You could also check out the podcast I'm part of called A Walk with Walt. And as I just mentioned, you can find me on my home base at Orange Grove 55 with Citrus Corner with all that sweet, juicy, but sometimes sticky Disney news and info.
That's awesome. And we got to have like a special camera that says, what color cardigan will Daddy Josh be wearing as he unveils this stuff?
Yeah.
Special footage live.
With his
News.
with his $300 hair product and his skinny jeans.
Yeah. Exactly. OG. The Emperor. The
Emperor. Well, I actually do have some Emperor. Hold on. I do have an Emperor. Let me see. I think I got some Palps in here. Yeah, here we go.
Everything is proceeding as I have foreseen.
I'm a big Palps fanboy. I love Palps.
If George and I ever get out of line, OG takes us backstage and zaps us with some lightning just to get us back in line.
But no, you can find me right here on Orange Grove 55. You can find me on Twitter at Orange Grove 55. You can also find me on Instagram and Threads, Orange Grove 55. So yeah, we do all kinds of content here. We do a lot of Disney park stuff like George was talking about. We also dive into the corporate world with Bob Iger, the board, the CEO succession, all that nerdy stuff. And then we also dive into the studio stuff and like Star Wars and Marvel and all that good stuff. So there's just a ton of stuff. So check us out, OG55. And Jay, I want to thank you as always, sir, for being such a gracious host. And I'm really excited to talk more Ahsoka with you, man.
Yeah, we got 5 more episodes to go through, so it's going to be good stuff. We'll see if any of our future predictions come to light. We'll see what actually happens with Morik's identity. We'll see where all this is going. We have no idea, but it's good to talk to you guys all about it. If you guys want to follow me, at Jay Sherer right here. You can also check out some of my original content over at How Stories Work with Jay Sherer. I just put out a trailer for our table read that we did, and I'm working on editing the table read right now. By the way, as I was saying, George Lucas is not the he's an amazing idea guy, maybe the best idea person in television and film history, but maybe not the best director. I'm having to do all this editing on my table read, and it's like the easiest editing you could possibly do, and I'm so bad at it. So I don't envy myself in all of that. But thanks again, Retro Nerd Girl, for joining us. Citrus George, OG55. It has been a pleasure. Please leave your comments down below about Ahsoka. We know we'll hear from the regulars. Captain John D, we need to hear some stuff down from you. Matthew Muir, we need to hear some things down from you in the comments. So hit us up down there. And thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you on the next episode.
Bye.